night storyteller, here to keep you company through the quiet hours. Many of you listen to these stories to fall asleep, and I'm honored to guide you there. And before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps keep the stories alive. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it on your side of the night? Now, get comfortable, relax, and let's begin. Nathan's fingers traced the contours of the mask, its carved features unsettlingly lifelike. The deep-set eyes, the slight downturn of the lips, there was something mournful about its expression, as though it knew something he did not. The antique shop smelled of dust and aged wood, the air thick with an unshakable stillness. "Never wear it after dark," the shopkeeper warned, his voice raspy with age. His eyes, cloudy and distant, lingered on Nathan's hands as they hovered over the mask. Nathan chuckled. "That's supposed to be some kind of sales pitch." The old man didn't smile. "Not a pitch, a warning." Nathan shrugged and handed over the cash. His hands trembled slightly as he tucked the mask into his satchel, its weight heavier than expected. Outside, the wind howled through the narrow coastal streets, salty air mingling with the scent of decay. His tiny studio apartment was only a few blocks away, its walls lined with unfinished canvases, his silent failures. Inspiration had been an elusive thing lately, slipping further away no matter how desperately he chased it. Maybe this mask would change that. That night, frustration gnawed at him. Every brushstroke felt forced, every composition lifeless. He turned toward the mask, now resting on the table, its empty eyes watching him. "Why not?" he muttered. Lifting it, he felt an odd warmth beneath his fingers, as if the wood were pulsing with life. He slipped it on. Silence. Then a whisper. At first it was distant, like wind sneaking through cracks in the walls. Then it grew sharper, syllables forming just beneath his skin, burrowing into his skull. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, stretching toward him. He ripped the mask off, heart hammering. The whispering stopped. The mask sat on his work table, its face subtly altered, the mournful expression now slightly amused. Nathan rubbed his eyes. Sleep. He needed sleep. Days passed. Each night the same cycle repeated. Creative frustration, the mask, the whispers, the shadows. But something strange was happening. People were forgetting him. It started subtly. His barista hesitated when saying his name. His landlord forgot about last month's rent. A gallery owner who once rejected his work looked at him blankly, as though they had never met. His reflection, too, had begun to change. It was almost imperceptible at first. A shift in his jawline, a faint unfamiliarity in the curve of his cheekbones. Then one night he saw it. Standing before the mirror, he studied his face, or tried to. His features were wrong, the angles unfamiliar, the eyes too hollow. His own reflection was becoming a stranger. Panic surged through him. He grabbed the mask, gripping its edges with white-knuckled force. "What are you doing to me?" he hissed. The mask grinned. Not physically, no, but he felt it. A pulse of amusement. A knowing presence lingering just beneath the surface. And then the knock came. A slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the window. Nathan turned stiffly. His apartment was on the 3rd floor. Through the glass, a face stared back at him, hollow-eyed, lips frozen in a silent plea. Another knock. Nathan staggered back, his breath ragged. The shadows at the edges of the room deepened. Not shadows, figures. Dozens of them, their faces blurred and shifting, like old photographs fading into nothingness. His stomach twisted. They were forgotten. Nathan fled, mask clutched to his chest like a lifeline. The shop. It was the only place left to go. The streets were deserted, the town swallowing his presence as if he'd never existed at all. He slammed into the shop's door, rattling the handle. "Let me in." The shopkeeper stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. "You wore it after dark." Nathan shoved the mask toward him. "Take it back, make it stop." The old man shook his head. "It doesn't work that way." The air was thick with something unspoken. Nathan's voice cracked. "I don't want to disappear." The shopkeeper sighed. "No one ever does." Nathan turned, his breath coming in sharp gasps. His reflection in the shop's glass window. It wasn't him anymore. The face staring back was someone else's, a stranger. His voice barely whispers, "Who am I?" The old man reached past him, gently prying the mask from his hands. "You're just another one in the collection now." Nathan tried to protest, to scream, but no words came. His body felt weightless. The world dimmed. Somewhere deep in the shadows of the antique shop, the mask found its place back on the shelf. Its face was different now, and it was smiling. The end. Chloe stepped onto the ferry, wrapping her coat tighter around herself. The midnight air was thick with fog, swallowing the distant lights of the riverbank. She had taken this route dozens of times before, crossing the river to visit her family. But tonight, the air felt heavier, the silence deeper. The other passengers sat in stiff, unmoving rows. They did not check their phones, did not glance around, did not speak. Their eyes, wide and unfocused, stared straight ahead. The boat lurched as it left the dock. The water was still, yet the ferry cut through it with eerie smoothness. Chloe leaned against the railing, staring into the mist. No sign of the opposite shore. Minutes passed, then an hour. Chloe checked her phone. 12:15 a.m. That couldn't be right. She had boarded at midnight, and the crossing should take only 15 minutes. She glanced around, her stomach twisting. The landscape on either side of the river was unchanged, swallowed by the never-ending fog. The ferry wasn't moving forward. It was adrift. The passengers sat as they had before, unblinking, silent. A chill rippled through her. "Excuse me," she whispered to the woman beside her. No reaction. "Hey." Nothing. Heart pounding, she turned to a man in a long coat. "Sir?" The man's head turned slightly as if hearing her through layers of water. His lips parted, but no words came. Chloe's breath came fast. She stood, gripping the railing. "Where are we going?" she called out, louder this time. The passengers turned in unison, staring, their pupils dark and bottomless. A slow, deliberate whisper tickled her ear. "The ferry never stops for those who look back." Chloe gasped and whirled around. An elderly man sat behind her, his eyes the only ones that seemed truly aware. His skin was paper-thin, his fingers folded neatly in his lap. "What?" she asked, voice trembling. He just shook his head. She needed answers. The wheelhouse, the captain. Someone had to be steering this boat. She climbed the narrow steps to the wheelhouse, pushing open the door. Empty. The wheel spun slowly, adjusting course on its own. The throttle moved, unseen hands guiding it. Chloe's stomach clenched. She turned, ready to flee, and froze. Through the fogged window she saw something in the water. A car, half sunken, its headlights barely flickering beneath the river's surface. Something about it tugged at the edge of her mind. A horrible familiarity. Her reflection in the glass flickered. For just a second, her own face was different, paler, hollow-eyed. Chloe stumbled down the stairs, her breath ragged. She ran past past the unmoving passengers, back to the railing. The fog was suffocating. The shore, where was the shore? She gritted her teeth. She had to get off this boat. Without thinking, she climbed over the railing, gripping the cold metal. She hesitated. The water below was pitch black, unnaturally still. A voice in her head whispered, "Jump," and she did. Icy coldness wrapped around her like a fist, dragging her down. Darkness. Chloe jolted awake, gasping for air. She was back in her seat, dripping wet. The passengers were staring at her, not blankly anymore. This time they understood. Her breath came in short, panic bursts. No, I. A movement caught her eye. The elderly man had turned to face her, his voice softer this time. "You already looked back." The realization crashed over her like a wave. The car, the water, the accident. She remembered the headlights veering, the sickening crunch of metal, the world tipping sideways as she plunged into the river. She had never made it across. She had never left the water at all, and now she never would. The fog thickened, swallowing the ferry whole. The boat drifted forward, deeper into the mist. The end. Karen stood in the dimly lit hallway of her new apartment building, her suitcase dragging against the warped wooden floor. The air smelled of dust and faint mildew, and the overhead lights flickered at uneven intervals. It wasn't much, but it was hers. As she slid the key into her door, she noticed something strange, a second door just a few feet down the hall. It was unmarked, old-looking, with peeling white paint and a tarnished brass handle. She glanced at the building's floor plan, which she had printed from the rental website. No other units were supposed to be on this floor. Her landlord, Mr. Elias, happened to be walking by with a clipboard. "Excuse me," she called. "What's that door?" He barely glanced at it. "Storage closet." Karen frowned. "Can I use it?" "No key, but—" "Storage closet," he repeated, firmer this time. Then he walked away. That night as Karen unpacked, she heard it. Scratching. She froze, straining her ears. The noise was faint but distinct, coming from behind the locked door. Probably mice, she told herself. Just an old building settling. Then came the laughter, a child's laugh. Karen's stomach dropped. She turned off the TV and pressed her ear against the door. Silence, the moment she stepped away. Scritch, scritch. She backed into her apartment, locking the door behind her. Days passed. She tried to ignore it, but every night the laughter returned. And then, the whispering. Her name. "Come in." Her sleep grew restless. The hallway lights flickered more often. The lock on the mysterious door seemed looser. One night, she woke to a faint creaking noise. The door was open. A dark gap yawned where the door had once been sealed shut. Karen's pulse pounded in her ears. Slowly, cautiously, she stepped closer. Inside was her childhood bedroom. Her breath caught. Same wallpaper, same small wooden desk. A bed with a neatly folded quilt, the same one she had as a child. And on the nightstand, sitting upright, was a teddy bear. Her teddy bear, the one she lost when she was 9. Karen stepped inside. The air was thick, charged like a storm was about to break. Her fingers brushed the bear's fur. It felt real. Warm. The door slammed shut behind her. Karen lunged at the handle. Locked. The room shifted. Her posters peeled away, revealing strange photographs underneath. They were all of her. At first they looked normal. Her smiling at a birthday party, on a beach trip. But as she scanned them, her stomach twisted. She was wearing clothes she never owned, posing with people she didn't recognize. One photo showed her standing in a house she had never lived in. Karen's hands trembled as she flipped through them. These weren't her memories. The walls rippled, distorting. Her reflection in the mirror shifted. Her face was almost right, but not quite. The nose too narrow, the eyes slightly the wrong shape. She clutched her head. No, no, no. Her gaze dropped to the desk. A note sat there in her own handwriting her meant to leave. Her breath hitched. The room was erasing her. The photos morphed. Now they showed other versions of her, each more distorted than the last. In some, her face was blurred out completely. A sickening thought gripped her. Has this happened before? Had she lived this life before, moved in, found this door, only to be rewritten? She pounded against the door. Let me out. The light bulb overhead popped, plunging the room into darkness. The whispering returned. Not just one voice, dozens, all of them saying her name. When the door finally creaked open, Karen stumbled out, gasping. The hallway was empty. The flickering lights had gone still. Her heart still hammering, she rushed to the landlord's office. Mr. Elias sat behind his desk, flipping through paperwork. He looked up. Can I help you? Karen's voice shook. The room, it opened. I was inside and something. He frowned. I'm sorry, who are you? Karen blinked. You rented me the unit at the end of the hall, she said. 4 days ago. He shook his head. That apartment's been vacant for months. The air left her lungs. No, I live there. I signed the lease. She turned. The hallway behind her was different. The paint fresher. The wallpaper is new, like no one had lived there in years. She ran back to her unit. Her hands shook as she tried to unlock the door. The key didn't fit. Her name wasn't on the mailbox. Her bags were gone. She stumbled back, shaking. This isn't happening. This isn't. A soft creak echoed behind her. The door to the room that wasn't there had opened again. Darkness pulsed beyond it, deep and yawning. A whisper drifted out. Come back inside, Karen. The hallway lights flickered one last time. Then she was gone. A week later, a new tenant moved in. As she carried boxes into her unit, she noticed a locked door down the hall. She frowned. That hadn't been on the floor plan. The end. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and husks as Claire and Luke stood at the edge of Renard's field. The rows of corn stretched endlessly under the fading autumn sun, their golden tips swaying with the breeze. The town called it cursed, but to Claire, it was just another overgrown field. Luke smirked, nudging her with his elbow. Last chance to back out. Claire rolled her eyes. It's just a cornfield. Then let's go. The stalks parted unwillingly, their crisp leaves dragging across their arms as they stepped inside. The sky burned orange, the last dregs of daylight slipping away behind them. They didn't hear the whispers at first. 10 minutes in, and the field felt too quiet. No crickets, no birds. Just the rustling of corn in the wind, except there wasn't any wind now. Luke chuckled, though his voice was thinner than before. Kinda creepy, huh? Claire sighed, glancing behind them. The barn near the entrance was gone. Just rows and rows of corn, stretching forever. Luke frowned. Didn't we come in from that way? Claire nodded, suddenly uneasy. Let's just head back. They turned, walked and walked and walked, but every time they ended up right where they started. A slow dread crawled up Claire's spine. That wasn't possible. The first whisper was faint. Just the wind, she told herself. Then it came again, weaving through the dry stalks, wrapping around her like a breath against her ear. Claire. She whirled. Luke. He was ahead of her, squinting into the distance. What? You didn't just say my name? He shook his head. Claire swallowed hard. The whispers were getting louder. The sun was gone now, and shadows stretched unnaturally between the stalks. Luke cursed under his breath. We'll climb up, see if we can spot a way out. He grabbed the nearest stalks to hoist himself up, but the corn moved, bending away from him before he could pull himself up. Luke staggered back, pale. Did you see that? Before Claire could answer, a giggle rippled through the corn. Not theirs. Something watching. Then Luke screamed. He was gone. No sounds of running, no struggle, just gone. Claire's breath came in sharp gasps. Then she saw it. A scarecrow, right where Luke had been standing. But this one was wearing his hoodie. Claire stumbled forward. Luke. The scarecrow tilted slightly as if listening. Its head, stuffed with straw, had no eyes, no mouth, just an old burlap sack with twisted stitches. But Luke's shoes poked out from the bottom of its frame. A soft, broken whisper drifted from the scarecrow's stitched mouth. Claire, help. Claire let out a strangled sob. Luke. Her hands shook as she reached for him. She tore at the rough twine that held his arms to the wooden post. The straw was wet, warm, like it had been soaked in blood. The whispering around her grew frenzied. She turned, and the corn had closed in. The first vine curled around her ankle, dragging her down. Claire screamed, kicking wildly, but the stalks were stronger than her. The whispers became chants, a dozen voices weaving together. The corn pressed against her lips, filling her mouth and throat. Her last thought was not fear, but understanding. This was a harvest, and it was her turn. By morning, 2 new scarecrows stood in the field. The wind whispered their names, and the town remained silent. The end. The clock read 2:47 a.m. Jack leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes as the glow of his monitor painted his cubicle in pale blue light. The graveyard shift at Nexicon Solutions was soul-draining, but it paid the bills. Most of his co-workers had already tuned out, their voices droning into headsets, following the same scripts over and over. Then his phone rang. It wasn't a normal call. The number didn't appear on the system. No customer ID, no record. Just a blinking unknown. Jack hesitated before answering. Hello, this is Jack with Nexicon Solutions. How may I assist you? Static. Then, Jack, you have to listen. They're coming. Get out. The voice sent ice down his spine. It was his own, identical, the same tone, same inflections, as if he were talking to himself. Hello, he said again, his voice now unsteady. They're taking them, Jack. One by one. You have to leave before it's too late. Click. The call ended. Jack let out a breath, staring at the phone like it might lunge at him. It had to be a prank, someone messing with the system. Right? He turned to Lisa, sitting at the desk across from him. Hey, did you just hear anything weird? No answer. Lisa? Her chair was empty. Her headset lay on the desk, the light still blinking as if she were on a call. But she was gone. Jack stood, peering around the dimly lit office. A few rows of cubicles down, Raj's desk was also empty, computer on, headset still in place. The hairs on his neck rose. He checked the break room, empty. The bathrooms, silent. It was just him now, just him and the calls. His phone rang again, unknown. His breath hitched. He picked up. Jack, you're almost out of time. No, you tell me what's going on, he demanded. Who are you? A pause. Then a whisper. I'm you, Jack. I'm what's left. The static deepened, crackling in his ear. Go to the basement. Find the phone. Click. The basement. No one went down there. It was just storage, an old relic from when the building was first constructed. But his gut told him to listen. Jack took the emergency stairwell, the air growing heavier as he moved downward. The fluorescent lights above flickered the further he went, the concrete walls closing in. When he reached the basement level, the door creaked open into complete darkness. The only sound was the distant hum of a ringing phone. His pulse hammered as he stepped forward. Rows of old office furniture and discarded monitors lined the room, draped in dust-covered plastic. The phone rang again, hidden somewhere in the clutter. Jack wove through the forgotten remnants of an older Nexicon, searching. Then he saw it. An antique rotary phone sitting on a small wooden desk in the center of the room, its black receiver vibrating with each ring. Jack hesitated. Then he answered. The voice on the other end was cold, familiar, not his own this time. "Welcome to the next shift, Jack." The line went dead. A heavy silence settled. Then he saw it. A roster on the desk, yellowed with age. He scanned the names, employees long gone, some crossed out, others smudged. His eyes trailed down to the last entry, his own name. Jack Holloway, status terminated. His breath stopped beneath his name written in faded ink, reassigned to graveyard shift, indefinite. He staggered back, knocking over a chair. The room around him seemed to pulse, as if the walls were breathing. The truth crashed down like a tombstone. He had been working here far longer than he remembered, and he had never left. Upstairs, his phone rang again. Jack turned, feeling the pull, the weight of eternity settling in. He climbed the stairs, step by step, his mind fogging over, his body remembering the motions. Back in his cubicle, the monitor flickered to life. His next call was waiting. Jack sat down, adjusting his headset. His manager's voice came through the line. "Good evening, Jack. Ready for another shift?" Jack smiled and answered. "The end." Ella sat at a wooden table in the dimly lit corner of the town library, the scent of aged paper thick in the air. Her fingers smudged with ink. She flipped through brittle newspaper clippings for her history project. The assignment was simple. Find an interesting historical event from their town and write a report. She had chosen a topic on disappearances, people who had walked into the night and never returned. That was when she saw it. A newspaper article, yellowed at the edges, staring at her like an unblinking eye. Local student Ella Carter seen at library, last confirmed sighting. Her breath hitched. The article described her in unsettling detail. Her favorite gray hoodie, the blue ink on her left hand, even the way she was chewing on the end of her pencil. Her gaze flickered to the byline. No date, no publication name, just a tiny phrase beneath the title. The paper mirror, always watching. The next day, against her better judgment, she returned. The library was too quiet, the air thick with the weight of words never spoken. Ella pulled out more newspapers from the same cabinet, her fingers trembling. Another article. Ella Carter struggles to finish her essay, glances at the clock, 3:17 p.m. She gasped, twisting her wrist to check the time. 3:17 p.m. Her chair scraped against the floor as she bolted upright. The librarian at the front desk looked up sharply. An older woman with deep wrinkles carved into her face, eyes that didn't blink. Ella swallowed hard and turned back to the paper. At the bottom of the article, in bold letters, "Soon she will try to run." Ella sprinted to the exit, but the bookshelves had shifted. Hadn't just past the fiction section. Now rows of shelves stretched endlessly before her, corridors twisting in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Dust swirled in the dim light. She turned a corner, but the shelves just led to more books, towering, unyielding. Something wasn't right. The library wasn't just a building, it was alive. She turned back toward the main hall, heart pounding. The librarians, 3 of them now, stood in different corners, unmoving, their heads slightly tilted as if listening. One of them stepped forward. A book slid from their hands. Ella barely glanced down before horror gripped her throat. The book's title, The Vanishing of Ella Carter. Her own face, sketched in ink, stared back at her from the cover. She stumbled backward, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The newspapers, the changing shelves, the way the librarians never blinked. It all clicked together. The library wasn't just predicting things, it was writing them. She didn't remember how long she ran. The hallways twisted like a maze, bookshelves moving, rearranging, trapping her deeper inside. The lights flickered, and then the clock above the desk chimed. Midnight. Ella turned a corner and saw a final newspaper clipping sitting neatly on a reading desk waiting for her. Hands shaking, she picked it up. Ella Carter reads her final headline. She begins to scream. Her breath hitched. The words on the page shifted, the ink curling, rearranging. She disappears into the story. A whisper of paper rustled behind her. Ella whirled around. The librarians were standing there, watching, waiting. The air became heavy, thick with an unseen force. The ink on the article bled across the page, reaching out like fingers. The floor beneath her softened, turned to paper, her legs sinking as if into quicksand. She thrashed, clawed at the air, but the words were swallowing her. Her scream echoed through the aisles as her body was dragged into the newspaper, her hands vanishing last, fingertips stained with ink. The article's text shifted one final time. Ella Carter joins the collection. The librarian picked up the clipping, dusted it off, and gently placed it back into the archive. And somewhere in the library, a book with Ella's name on the spine slid into place, waiting. The end. Margaret hated the rain, not just because it drenched her clothes and made her shoes squeak, but because it never stopped. It had poured over the city for weeks now, turning the world into a monochrome smear of wet pavement and blurred neon signs. The subway was her only refuge, even if it reeked of damp coats and tired bodies pressed too close. Tonight it was particularly crowded. She squeezed into a corner, her breath fogging the window. The train jerked forward, and she glanced around, bored, until she saw him. A man sitting across from her, dark suit, thinning hair, wire-rimmed glasses. Something about his face prickled at her memory. Then it clicked. He looked exactly like her old high school history teacher, Mr. Brennan. Same droopy eyelids, same sharp nose, but wrong. Mr. Brennan had a scar on his chin from a shaving accident. This man's skin was smooth. His lips curled into an unfamiliar smirk, as if he knew her confusion. Margaret turned away. A coincidence. Just a look-alike. But then she saw another. A woman by the doors, wearing a yellow raincoat. She looked like her mother. No, almost like her mother. The eyes were slightly too large, the cheeks too hollow. She was staring at Margaret, unblinking. Margaret's stomach twisted. At the next stop, she shoved out of the train, her breath coming fast. The days that followed were worse. The city, always a blur of anonymous faces, had become a nightmare of familiarity. At coffee shop, the barista had her best friend Angela's nose, but a stranger's mouth. A man on the crosswalk had her cousin Jacob's lazy eye, but his skin seemed stretched too tight, and they were all watching her. Margaret locked herself in her apartment that night, pressing her back against the door. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe the rain had soaked into her skull, making her see ghosts in the living. A sharp knock jolted her upright. Through the peephole, she saw a woman in a red coat. The hood covered most of her face, but what little Margaret could see made her blood run cold. It was her own face, stitched together wrong. The woman knocked again. Margaret backed away, her fingers trembling as she reached for her phone. But before she could dial, the knocking stopped. When she checked again, the hallway was empty. The next evening, she saw him. A man in the subway station, leaning against the grimy wall. He wore a navy coat, but it wasn't his clothing that chilled her. It was his face. It was her father's, every detail perfectly replicated, except the mouth was too wide, the teeth too straight. He smiled at her. Margaret's feet moved before she made the decision. She followed him. Past the turnstiles, down the station's side exit, out into the rain-slicked alleys where the streetlights barely reached. The man's pace never changed, as if he knew she was behind him. Then he stopped. Margaret held her breath. Slowly he turned, and with both hands he peeled his face off. The skin came away like wet paper, revealing nothing beneath. No flesh, no bone, just a smooth, yawning void where his features had been. Margaret staggered backward. The creature raised the empty face as if inspecting it. Then, in a voice like rusted hinges, it whispered, "Yours will do nicely." Margaret screamed. She ran, slipping on the wet pavement, her heartbeat slamming against her ribs. She didn't dare look back. She woke up in her bed. Her sheets were damp, her hands still shaking. Had it been a nightmare? She stumbled to the bathroom, flicking on the light. Her stomach dropped. Her reflection was gone, not distorted, not shadowed, just missing. Margaret stepped closer, her fingers pressing against the mirror. The glass was cool, solid. Her breath fogged it, but no face stared back. Panic seized her. She grabbed her phone and dialed Angela. "Hello, Angie, it's me." Margaret gasped, a pause. "Who is this?" Margaret's throat clenched. "What are you talking about? It's me, Margaret." Silence. Then a nervous chuckle. "Sorry, I don't know a Margaret." The line went dead. Margaret's phone slipped from her fingers. A rustling sound behind her made her spin around. The television was on, though she hadn't touched the remote. The news played, a live broadcast from a street corner nearby. A reporter interviewed a woman in a red coat. Margaret's breath hitched. The woman had her face. Margaret's hands flew to her cheeks, fingers pressing into her skin, into the features she knew were hers. But on the screen, the woman was smiling, laughing, living. She tried to scream, but no sound came. Outside, the rain kept falling. The end. Red Hollow was a town that had learned to fear the wind. Every fall, the dust storms came, howling across the desert, turning the sky into a swirling, copper-colored nightmare. Windows were boarded, doors locked, and streets abandoned long before sunset. The locals didn't call it weather. They called it the hunt. Ellis Carter, new to town and skeptical of small-town superstitions, found it all absurd. He had spent the last 10 years photographing extreme weather, chasing hurricanes and tornadoes for magazines. Compared to that, a little desert wind was nothing. So when Mrs. Lowry, the owner of the local diner, His gaze turned flinty. It's not just the storm, it's what's inside it. That night, the wind arrived like a beast shaking off its chains. Ellis stood on his porch, camera in hand, as the first gusts rattled the shutters. Sand spiraled in the air, scratching at the wood like claws. The town had gone silent. No headlights on the roads, no laughter from the bar down the street. It was as if the whole town had vanished. He lifted his camera and snapped a picture. Through the viewfinder, the storm was alive. The wind didn't just shift the sand, it shaped it. Faces seemed to form in the dust, wide eyes, gaping mouths, fleeting expressions of agony. He blinked and lowered the camera. Nothing but swirling grit, a trick of the light. Then he heard it. A voice carried on the wind. "Help me." Ellis straightened, lowering his camera. The sound was faint, almost lost in the storm, but it was there, a child's voice. He turned toward the street. Beyond his fence, the storm thickened, the world beyond swallowed by shifting dunes of dust. Another voice. Closer. "Please, I'm lost." Ellis hesitated, fingers tightening around the porch railing. It was probably just the wind whistling through the buildings. But then he saw them. Dark figures drifting through the storm, their forms barely visible through the veil of sand. They moved strangely, not quite walking, not quite floating. One turned toward him. Ellis's breath caught. The figure had no face, just a hollow void where its features should have been. The wind howled, and suddenly something small and half-buried tumbled toward his feet. A doll. Its plastic face was cracked, its button eyes half covered in dust. Ellis picked it up, his pulse hammering. It was old, too old, like it had been waiting in the sand for years. The whispers grew louder. "Ellis," he staggered back. The voices were calling his name now, curling through the storm like fingers reaching for him. Then another whisper, different. "We can give her back." His stomach turned to ice. They couldn't know. No one in Red Hollow could have known about Mia. His little sister, gone for 20 years. Swallowed by a river while he was supposed to be watching her. They had never found her body. The wind coiled around him, warm and insistent. The voices thickened, overlapping. "Just come with us. She's waiting." Ellis took a step forward. The sand shifted beneath his feet. The figures in the storm reached out, their faceless heads tilting expectantly. The doll in his hands suddenly felt heavier. His fingers trembled as he traced its brittle hair. Mia had a doll like this once. Another gust of wind whipped against him, carrying the scent of something ancient, something wrong. His instincts screamed. Ellis turned to run, but the storm closed in. The next morning, Red Hollow was quiet. The wind had died with the dawn, leaving only a thin layer of dust coating the empty streets. At the edge of Ellis's porch, his camera sat half buried in the sand. Mrs. Lowry found it when she came to check on him. She brushed the dust from the lens and pressed the power button. Only one photo had been taken that night. The image flickered onto the screen. Ellis's face, frozen in terror, eyes wide as a wall of sand rushed toward him. There were no footprints leading away, only the wind, and it was still hungry. The end. The first time Jack and Laura noticed the static, they laughed it off. It started small, flickering lines on the TV when they walked past, bursts of white noise on their phones during calls. The house was old, the wiring outdated, probably interference. But then it got worse. The radio crackled whenever they entered a room. Their phones glitched, voices breaking into distorted whispers before new smart speaker emitted low, garbled murmurs at night. Laura woke up once, swearing she had heard her name in the static. Jack was in the basement when he found the tape. The old TV in the corner had been there when they moved in, buried under dust and tangled cords. He had been trying to fix it, to at least get a working screen. When he pried open the back panel, something clattered out, a VHS tape wedged deep inside. There was no label, no markings. Curious, he carried it upstairs. "Hey, Laura, look what I found." She turned from unpacking. "What is it?" "An old tape. Might be a home movie or something." Laura frowned. "We don't have a VCR." Jack grinned, grabbing his phone. "Marketplace might have one cheap." Static screeched from the speakers. The screen distorted, flickering between apps before shutting off completely. Jack stared. "Okay, that was weird." Laura shivered. "Just don't play it, all right? This place is creepy enough already." Jack played it anyway. The next night, after Laura had fallen asleep, he set up the old TV in the basement. The VCR he had bought at a thrift shop whirred as it swallowed the tape. The screen flickered. Grainy footage appeared. A family, a man, woman, and 2 children sitting at a dinner table laughing. The timestamp in the corner read October 17th, 1992. Jack watched, fascinated. The footage was mundane: breakfast, yard work, a birthday cake being cut. But then something changed. The family sat down to dinner again. The same dinner, the exact same movements. The timestamp still reads October 17th, 1992. Jack leaned closer. The mother reached for a glass of water. The father wiped his mouth. Then they vanished, mid-motion, gone, as if someone had cut them from the film. But the camera kept rolling. The empty chairs, the uneaten food, the still running faucet in the kitchen. Jack's breath hitched. Then the screen filled with static. A shape moved within the noise, indistinct, shifting. Then a whisper, barely audible beneath the crackle. "Are you watching?" Jack yanked the tape out. The basement lights flickered, buzzing like a swarm of insects. He bolted upstairs, his pulse hammering. The static got worse. It followed them. The radio hissed. The TV flickered. Their phones refused to hold a charge. One night, Laura gasped from the hallway. "Jack, look, the living room TV was on," though neither of them had touched the remote. The screen showed their bedroom. Jack and Laura stood frozen, watching the grainy black and white footage. It was live, but there was no camera in their room. Then something moved behind Laura on screen. A shadow creeping forward. Laura's breath hitched. "Turn it off." Jack lunged for the remote. The screen flashed with static, and for a split second the family from the tape appeared. Their faces blurred, their mouths open in silent screams. Then, gone. The screen went black, the whispers became voices. At night they heard them layered beneath the static, growing clearer. "Help us. Don't let it take you. And worst of all, it remembers." Jack woke up gasping. The house was recording them. He scrambled for his phone, opening the camera. Nothing. His reflection gone. His hands shook as he turned to Laura. "Laura, check your phone." She did. Her pupils shrank. "Jack, my pictures." Every photo of them was corrupted. Their images were stretched, blurred, dissolving into static. Their wedding photos, their vacation pictures, even their childhood photos, ones taken long before they moved here. Jack's voice was barely a whisper. "It's erasing us." The house hummed in response. The TV flicked on by itself, the speakers filling with static. The screen showed their kitchen table, the same one they sat at every morning, but the timestamp in the corner read October 17th, 1992. A lump formed in Jack's throat. They were already gone. The next morning, the house was silent. The noticed the for sale sign had been removed. The house looked as if no one had lived there for years. Inside, a single VHS tape sat in the basement. The screen flickered. New footage played. A man and a woman laughing over dinner. The timestamp read October 17th, 1992. And then they vanished. The end. Jared knew something was wrong with the building on his first day. It wasn't just the size of it. 12 stories of sleek, windowless offices, a maze of identical hallways and conference rooms. It was the way the layout shifted when you weren't paying attention. His cubicle was in section D. Simple enough. But when he left for the break room, following the signs, he somehow ended up in section F, on the opposite side of the building. By lunch, he was hopelessly turned around. New guy, huh? His coworker Mira laughed when he mentioned it. Yeah, everyone gets lost at first. This place is like a labyrinth. Another coworker, Owen, leaned in. Just don't take the long hallway. Jared frowned. What hallway? But before Owen could answer, Mira shot him a sharp look. Don't mess with him. That afternoon, Jared found it. A corridor stretching impossibly far in both directions. The walls were smooth, unmarked, and the fluorescent lights overhead cast a cold, sterile glow. There were no doors, no turns, no signs. He hesitated. How had he ended up here? He had just been looking for the restroom. The silence pressed against him. Even the hum of the building, computers, printers, distant voices, had disappeared. Jared took a step forward. The corridor seemed to shift. Or maybe it was his eyes playing tricks on him. He turned back, only to find more corridor behind him. A chill crawled up his spine. No, he had just turned a corner. He should be able to retrace his steps. His pulse quickened as he walked faster. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting brief shadows that stretched unnaturally long. Then, finally, a door. Jared shoved it open, heart hammering. He stumbled into the break room. Mira glanced up from her coffee. You good? Jared swallowed hard. He turned back to the door he had just entered through. It was a supply closet. The corridor began appearing everywhere. One morning he stepped into an elevator, pressed for the lobby, and the doors slid open to reveal that same endless hallway. He slammed the close button, his breath ragged. Another time he opened a janitor's closet, only to see the corridor stretching beyond the shelves. It followed him home, invading his dreams. He'd wake up sweating, convinced he had been walking it for hours, his feet aching as if he had never truly left. When he brought it up at work, his coworkers went silent. Mira's hand tightened around her coffee mug. Just don't go looking for things you don't need to find. But it's there. You've seen it, right? What is it? Owen shot him a warning glance. People who ask too many questions don't last here. Jared couldn't let it go. Late one night, long after the office had emptied, he returned to the corridor. This time he didn't turn back. His footsteps echoed. Swallowed by the silence. The walls were the same, smooth and featureless. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering at irregular intervals. He walked for what felt like hours. The corridor never changed. Then up ahead, something different. A door. Jared's breath caught as he reached for the handle. Inside was a dimly lit room. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls, and in the center stood a bulletin board covered in photos. Jared stepped closer. Employees, rows and rows of them, faces familiar and unfamiliar. But there was something wrong. Their faces were blurred. Their names were scratched out. He skimmed the names still legible beneath the scratches. Owen, Mira, others he had seen in passing. A cold horror settled in his gut. The employees who had quit, the ones who asked too many questions. The walls whispered as the air grew thick, heavy. Jared turned. A shadowed figure loomed in the doorway. Not a person, not fully. Its hands were too long, fingers curling unnaturally as it reached toward the bulletin board. Slowly, deliberately, it lifted a new photo. Jared's breath hitched, his own face blurring, his name scratched out by unseen hands. Jared ran. The door slammed behind him, but the corridor was different now. The lights buzzed erratically, casting shifting shadows that reached for him. His steps quickened. The hallway stretched on, endless, unchanging, a loop with no exit. The walls whispered his name. Jared kept running, and the corridor swallowed him whole. The next morning, the office was as normal as ever. A new employee started that day. His cubicle was in Section D. He got lost looking for the break room. Mira smiled kindly at him. New guy, huh? Owen chuckled. Just don't take the long hallway. The end. The library always felt different at night. During the day, it was a place of whispered conversations, rustling pages, and the rhythmic tap of keyboards. But after midnight, when most students had gone, it became something else. Quieter than quiet, a silence too thick, too heavy. Sophie liked studying late. The solitude helped her focus. But tonight something was off. It started when she found the ledger. She had dropped her pen, and when she bent to retrieve it, her fingers brushed against something beneath the desk. A book, thick and old, wedged into the shadows. She pulled it out, frowning. The cover was plain, worn leather with no title. When she opened it, dust curled from its pages. Inside there were names, dozens of them, written in neat looping script, each followed by a tally mark. Some had one tally, others had two, a few had three. Sophie flipped through the pages, her heart beating faster. She recognized some of the names, students who had gone missing. Students whispered about in hushed tones. Remember Adam, just vanished last year. Or Lena was supposed to graduate, but no one's seen her since finals. At the bottom of the last page there was a blank line, waiting. A cold prickle crawled up Sophie's spine. She shoved the ledger back under the desk and gathered her things. She needed air. The next day things started disappearing. First her notebook, then her library books, even her student ID, though she knew she had placed it in her bag. The librarian, a quiet woman with thin-rimmed glasses, barely looked up when Sophie asked if anyone had turned in her things. Lost items usually turn up, she said, stamping a book with an old-fashioned thud. Sophie nodded, but the unease remained. That night she returned to the library. The ledger was still there. She hadn't imagined it. The pages rustled as she flipped back to the last entry. The blank line remained. Her name wasn't there. Not yet. But then she saw it. A tally mark, faintly scratched into the wood of her desk, right where she always sat. Sophie's stomach twisted. Has it been there before? She ran her fingers over the grooves. Deep, deliberate, she looked around. The library was nearly empty. Just a few students hunched over their books, a lone librarian shelving in the distance. But she felt watched. The shadows moved when they shouldn't. At first, she thought it was her imagination. Just tricks of the dim lighting, exhaustion playing with her vision. But then they started flickering in places where no light should have cast them. At night she saw them under her dorm door, shifting. Something was waiting. Sophie went back to the ledger. She tried to tear out the page. It wouldn't rip. The paper felt wrong. Too thick, too heavy, like old parchment. She slammed the book shut and shoved it in her bag. If she couldn't destroy it here, she'd burn it later. But when she got back to her dorm, the ledger was gone. In its place, resting neatly on her desk, was her missing notebook. The tally by her name had doubled. Her breath came fast, shallow. She looked around, half expecting to see someone watching, but the library was its usual midnight stillness. The names in the ledger were written by hand. Someone had to have added them. Sophie flipped through the pages again. Her fingers trembled as she traced the inked names. Some were written with care, others jagged, hurried, as if done in desperation. A horrifying thought settled in her gut. The names weren't written by a thing. They were written by a person. Or rather, by the last person to disappear. Sophie tried to stay away from the library. She really did, but the tally kept growing. 4, 5, and the shadows grew bolder. They slithered closer, stretching toward her feet, brushing against her fingertips when she reached for a light switch. Something was counting down. She knew what she had to do. She returned to the library, hands cold as she retrieved the ledger. She opened to the last page. The blank lines stared back. Her pen hovered over the paper. Her mind screamed at her to run, to fight, to refuse. But the tally by her name was 6 now, and she didn't know what happened at 7. She wasn't ready to find out. Her fingers tightened around the pen. The ink bled onto the page as she wrote the only name that came to mind. When she finished, she slammed the book shut. The library lights flickered. The shadows stilled. She exhaled, shoulders slumping. It was over. The next morning, a new student sat at Sophie's usual desk, looking dazed. "Lose something?" the librarian asked, sliding a missing notebook across the counter. The student took it with a confused frown. "Weird. I thought I had this with me last night." The librarian just smiled. In the shadows beneath the desk, the ledger waited. The end. The wind howled through the mountains, rattling the cabin's wooden frame like the shaking of a dying beast. Snow piled against the windows, blotting out the world beyond. Lily pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace. They had been trapped here for hours. "This storm wasn't supposed to hit this hard," said Mason, pacing near the boarded-up door. "We should have been back in town by now." "I told you guys this place was cursed," Quinn muttered, rubbing her arms. "My grandmother always said weird things happen up here. I thought she was just messing with me, but..." Lily's eyes flickered to the mantel, where an unlit candle sat beside a pack of matches. It hadn't been there when they arrived. "Did anyone put that there?" she asked. No one answered. A sudden thunk echoed from the farthest corner of the cabin, making them all jump. The room dimmed. The last of the power had failed. Darkness swallowed the cabin whole. Mason swore under his breath, "We need light." Without thinking, Lily grabbed the matches and struck one. The candle's flame erupted to life, too fast, too bright. It did not flicker like normal fire. Colors rippled within it, blue, green, crimson. It cast unnatural shadows that stretched and moved against the cabin walls. Lily took an uneasy step back. This doesn't feel right." The shadows deepened. Hours passed. The candle burned lower, but it never dimmed. The wind screamed outside, but inside, a heavy silence settled over them. Then came the first disappearance. Emma. 1 second she was there wrapped in a blanket by the fire. The next, gone, no scream, no sound. Only her shadow remained burned into the wooden wall behind her seat. The air hummed with something Lily couldn't explain. She turned to the others, throat dry. We have to put the candle out. Quinn grabbed a cup of melted snow and threw it at the flame. The fire did not go out. Instead it flared brighter, casting flickering shapes on the walls, shadows of people who weren't there. People long gone. The next to vanish was Mason. He had been standing by the window, cursing at the storm. Then nothing, just his outline blackened against the glass. The candle had burned even lower. Lily's chest tightened. It's counting down. Quinn turned to her, voice shaking. When the candle goes out, we go out. The realization settled over them like a burial shroud. Lily's hands clenched. Then we have to stop it before it burns completely. The storm raged on. The candle burned to its final inch. Only Lily and Quinn remained. Maybe if we leave the cabin. Quinn started, but she was already fading. Her features blurred, her body thinning like mist until nothing. Her shadow stretched across the cabin floor, reaching toward the flame. Lily's breath came fast, uneven. She was alone. The candle flickered, and in its depths she saw them. Emma, Mason, Quinn, dozens of others. Figures trapped in the light, their mouths open in silent screams, and beyond them something else, something watching, something waiting. Lily's fingers trembled as she reached for the candle. If it went out on its own, she would be taken like the rest. There was only one choice, one way to end this. She took a deep breath and blew out the flame. The storm cleared by morning. The cabin was silent. When hikers found it years later, they discovered no bodies, no signs of struggle, just shadows burned into the walls. Hundreds of them. Among them one stood near the fireplace, its hand stretched as if reaching for something just beyond the darkness. The end. Melinda first heard the whispers on her third night in the apartment. She had been brushing her teeth when something beneath the gurgling water caught her attention, a faint, rhythmic murmur rising from the drain. She froze, toothbrush clenched in her hand. The sound was low, almost too soft to be real. Like someone was whispering through the pipes. She leaned closer. "Alone now, aren't you?" The words slithered through the air, curling around her spine like cold fingers. Melinda staggered back, heart pounding. The bathroom was empty. The apartment was empty. It was just the drain, just the pipes. She turned off the faucet, wiped her face, and forced herself to ignore it. The voices didn't stop. Each night they returned, and they knew things. Her name, her thoughts, the way she still flinched at the ghost of her ex-husband's touch. The worst of it came on a Sunday night when she finally gathered the courage to answer. She stood over the sink, staring into the drain's dark opening. The metal was rusted, edges jagged. "What do you want?" she whispered. The voices shifted, hissed. Then, clear as day, "He's going to die tomorrow." The breath caught in her throat. "Who?" Silence. Then, "The man in 4B. Melinda's hands trembled. 4B belonged to Mr. Calloway, the quiet old man with thick glasses and an apartment full of dusty books. Her stomach twisted. It was nonsense, it had to be. But the next morning, she saw the paramedics wheeling out his body, a black sheet covering his face. He had died in his sleep. Melinda stood frozen in her doorway. The whispers had been right. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating. Every night she pressed her ear against the bathroom drain, listening. She didn't want to, but she had to. And the voices told her more. Her neighbor from 3C, she won't last the week. The woman who lived above her, she's already slipping away. The warnings always came true. The construction workers outside barely glanced at the bodies being removed, as if the constant disappearances were just another part of the building's slow decay. Melinda tried to warn people, tried to tell the landlord, the other tenants, but they only gave her that look, the one that said she was the problem. You need to rest, the woman from 3C had told her, a concerned smile on her lips. This place does things to your mind. 3 days later, 3C's door was wide open. The apartment inside was empty, not just of her neighbor, of everything. No furniture, no clothes, no trace that anyone had ever lived there. Melinda's hands shook as she unscrewed the vent in the bathroom wall. She had to know. The whispers were coming from somewhere. She pulled the cover loose, feeling stale air rush against her face. Beyond it, darkness. A narrow crawl space stretched into the unknown, lined with damp concrete and rusting pipes. And carved into the walls, names, hundreds of them, scrawled in desperation, scratched deep with shaking hands. Some were crossed out, others had tallies beside them. One name stopped her cold, Mr. Calloway. Her pulse pounded in her ears. At the very end of the list, freshly etched Melinda Carter. Her stomach dropped. She turned. The bathroom light flickered. The drain gurgled, and the whispers welcomed her home. Days later, the landlord unlocked 6A for a new tenant. It was completely empty. Not a single sign that anyone had ever lived there. The new tenant took a shower their first night, humming as the steam curled around the mirror. Then they heard it, a faint whisper rising from the drain. Alone now, aren't you? The end. The lake was wrong from the start. Alex noticed it the moment they arrived at the secluded cabin. The water was dark, almost black, despite the clear sky above. No matter how the sun shone, the surface never reflected the clouds or trees. It's just algae, Jake shrugged, hauling a cooler onto the porch. Lakes get weird sometimes. But it wasn't the color that unsettled Alex. It was the way the water seemed to watch. At sunset, as they laughed around the fire pit, the lake remained eerily still, a slick, unblinking eye gazing back at them. The first sign something was wrong came that night. Tanya screamed, waking them all. They found her by the shore, clutching a child's shoe, water dripping from her trembling hands. It just floated up, she whispered. No one else saw it. Jake took the shoe from her, frowning. It was tiny, white with faded red stitching, a relic of someone long gone. It's probably just trash from the bottom, he assured her, but his eyes kept darting back to the lake. The next day, Alex tried to convince himself it was all in their heads. Just paranoia from too many ghost stories and the oppressive quiet of the woods. But as they lounged by the water, Alex noticed something unnerving. The lake didn't reflect them. Not their faces, not their bodies, not even the cabin behind them. Instead, strangers peered up from beneath the water. Pale, distorted faces pressing against the surface, their eyes wide and mouths stretched in silent screams. Alex's breath hitched. He stumbled back, pulling Tanya away from the edge. "Do you see that?" he gasped. She glanced at the water, brow furrowing. "What?" When Alex looked again, the faces were gone. That night, more objects appeared on shore, a cracked mirror, its frame twisted and warped, an old photograph, the image waterlogged and faded beyond recognition. Jake tried to stay positive, claiming it was all just a series of creepy coincidences. But even his bravado faltered when Ben disappeared. They woke to find his sleeping bag empty, his shoes still neatly placed by the cabin door. The lake was unnaturally calm, its surface like polished obsidian. "Ben!" Jake shouted, his voice cracking. The only response was the rustling of leaves and the low murmur of the wind. Then the water rippled. Ben's face broke the surface, but he wasn't breathing. He stared up at them, eyes bulging, mouth open in a silent, endless scream. Tanya collapsed, sobbing. Jake turned pale, stumbling away from the shore. Alex felt the truth settle in his bones like ice. "The lake, it's swapping places with us," he whispered, "trapping us below." The remaining trio packed, frantic to escape, but as Alex loaded the car, he caught sight of the lake once more. His own reflection stared back, but it didn't move with him. It waved a slow, mocking gesture. Then it grinned, lips stretching too wide, revealing teeth too sharp. His reflection was no longer his own. It belonged to the lake now. They drove away, the cabin and the cursed water vanishing in the rearview mirror. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a persistent itch at the back of his mind. When they finally reached the gas station, Tanya and Jake stumbled inside, desperate for human contact, for safety. Alex paused at the car, glancing into the side mirror. His face looked back, but his eyes, they were wrong. A deep, endless black like the lake. And as he blinked, he saw the forest reflected in his eyes. Trees swaying, shadows flickering, but no cabin, no car, no Tanya or Jake. Just the lake and the trapped souls below. Because Alex wasn't in the car anymore. He was still by the water, staring up at the surface from the depths below, mouth open in a silent scream. The last thing he saw before the water closed over him was his own face, leaning down, whispering into the ripples, "Goodbye. The end." The thrift store hadn't been there before. Jenna was sure of it. She walked this route home every day, past the row of quiet antique shops and shuttered bookstores. Yet tonight, tucked between a laundromat and an abandoned cafe, a door stood open. Above it, a flickering sign read, "The Room of Lost Things." The shop's interior was impossibly large, stretching deep into the shadows, lined with cluttered shelves. The air smelled of dust and forgotten places. An old man sat behind the counter, thin-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. He gave Jenna a knowing smile. "Take your time," he said, voice like rustling pages. "Whatever calls to you is yours." Jenna hesitated. Then something caught her eye. She wandered through the aisles, running her fingers over odd trinkets, antique keys, old books with blank pages, watches ticking at different speeds. Then she saw it, a doll sitting atop a wooden shelf. Her stomach tightened. It was hers, her childhood doll, the one she had lost years ago at a family picnic. Same blue dress, same chipped porcelain face. Jenna lifted it with shaking hands. "How?" She turned to the shopkeeper, but he only watched, silent. The doll felt the same, smelled of the attic where she used to keep it hidden. A memory surfaced, sharp and sudden. She had locked the doll away after waking one night to find it sitting at the foot of her bed. Even though she had put it in the attic, Jenna should have left then, but she didn't. She came back the next night. This time, an earring gleamed on a glass display case, a single silver hoop, the one she had lost in high school the night she had left a party in tears. She picked it up and the memory flooded back, Her ex's cruel words, the way she had pulled the earring off in anger before throwing it. Jenna shivered. Had someone found it? Or had it been waiting here all along? The visits became a compulsion. Each time, she found something else she had lost. Her grandmother's watch, a missing notebook filled with old poems, a hairbrush with strands of her younger self's hair still tangled in its bristles. Each item brought memories she had buried, things she had discarded long ago. Yet here they were, sitting on shelves waiting for her. One night, as she reached for a familiar-looking scarf, the shopkeeper's voice cut through the quiet. "Some things lost," he murmured, "should stay lost." Jenna froze. He had never spoken directly to her before. She turned to respond, but the store was empty. Something was wrong with the shop. It never closed. No matter the time, morning, midnight, the door was always open. No customers ever entered. No one else ever spoke of it. And yet the inventory grew. One evening, Jenna found a photo album tucked in the back of the shop. It was hers. She flipped through the pages, breath hitching. The pictures were wrong. Her childhood home, but with doors that weren't there. Her college dorm, but the windows showed a different sky. And then a photo of the thrift store. The door stood open, and she was inside, watching herself. Jenna ran. She shoved past shelves and broken memories, heading for the exit. But when she reached the front of the store, the counter was empty. The shopkeeper was gone. A chill crept through her bones. Behind the counter, where the old man had once sat, a chair waited. She turned, heart pounding. The shelves were no longer filled with random antiques. They were filled with her life. Not just things she had lost, things she had yet to lose. A key she didn't recognize. A phone with her number scrawled on the back. A wedding ring that wasn't hers. She backed away, desperate to leave. Then, a shadow moved between the aisles. Jenna's past selves wandered the shop, picking up old objects, reliving their memories over and over. Searching, forgetting, trapped. Her breath hitched. She had been here before, many times. She turned back to the chair and sat down. The bell above the door chimed. A new customer had arrived. Jenna smiled. "Take your time," she said. "Whatever calls to you is yours." The end. The first time Jake heard Station 104.6, it was past midnight, and the airwaves were nearly dead. Static hissed through his old transceiver as he twisted the dial, searching for something, anything besides dead noise. Then a voice cut through. "Please, if anyone is listening, help us." Jake froze. The voice was male, breathless with panic, the kind of terror that wasn't staged. More voices followed, overlapping in static. "They locked us in. The fire is everywhere. Can't escape. Can't." Then, just as suddenly, the voices cut out. Dead silence. Jake's pulse thundered in his ears. He checked his log. 104.6 FM. Except that was impossible. There was no station on that frequency. The next night he listened again. At exactly 12 a.m. the broadcast returned. This time it wasn't distress calls. It was a confession. A woman's voice, shaking. "I never meant to hurt them, I swear. I didn't know the brakes would fail." Then a man, low, gravelly. "They never found the body. Buried it deep. If anyone knew." Jake leaned in, gripping his notebook. These weren't stories, they were real. But when he searched the names they mentioned, the locations, the crimes, everything was decades old. Accidents, unsolved cases, people who had disappeared without a trace. How could these voices sound so fresh? Jake couldn't let it go. He traced the signal's source to an abandoned radio station outside town. The place was a relic, dusty consoles, cracked vinyls, old reel-to-reel machines still turning, though the power had been cut for years. The control board glowed with an unnatural light. Then, a whisper crackled through the speakers. "You found us." Jake stumbled back. The radio wasn't plugged in. Yet the broadcast continued. He turned to leave, and the dials began to spin on their own, tuning, searching, until he heard something that made his blood run cold. His own voice. "I shouldn't have come here." The words echoed through the station, but Jake hadn't spoken. Not yet. Then, "There's something in the booth. It's watching me." Jake turned. A figure stood beyond the glass. Dark, motionless, listening. The air grew thick, pressing against his lungs. Then, "I don't think I'm leaving." The broadcast cut out. Jake ran. The next night, he swore he wouldn't listen. But at 12 a.m., his radio turned on by itself. His own voice crackled through the speakers, describing events he hadn't experienced yet. "The police will find my body in the station. The tape will be missing. The station won't exist." Jake's breath came fast, uneven. "They'll think I was never here." Days later, the police found Jake's abandoned car outside an empty lot. No station, no equipment, nothing. Only his radio, still tuned to 104.6 FM. At midnight, the air crackled, and a new voice joined the phantom broadcast. The end. Emily arrived at the house just before dusk, the sky bruised with the last traces of daylight. The Victorian mansion loomed before her, its gabled roof and warped windows casting long, skeletal shadows across the overgrown garden. Her Aunt Lydia had lived here alone for years, surrounded by her collection. Emily shivered. She had always hated the dolls. Now they were hers. The inside smelled of dust and something sickly like rotting flowers. The dolls were everywhere. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with porcelain faces frozen in time. Some smiled. Others stared blankly, their painted eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. She had grown up visiting this house, always uncomfortable under their watchful gaze. But there were more now. Far more than she remembered. That night, Emily dreamed of whispers, a soft, rustling sound like fabric shifting in the dark. When she woke, the bedroom door was open, and a doll sat on the floor. She was sure she had left it on the shelf. Now it faced her, its lips stitched into an almost smile. She found her aunt's journals in the study. Lydia had written obsessively about souls. "A life is only fleeting unless preserved. The body withers, but the essence can remain." Emily turned the page, hands trembling. A perfect likeness captures more than appearance. It holds something else, a tether. She slammed the book shut. She didn't want to know, but she already did. The dolls began moving, appearing in different rooms, shifting in position. One stood by the window, gazing out at the road, as if waiting for someone. Another sat at the dining table, hands delicately placed before it. Emily locked them away, yet by morning they were back, watching, waiting. Then she noticed the faces, dolls that hadn't been there before. One looked just like her neighbor, Mrs. Holden, who hadn't answered the phone in days. Another, her childhood friend Claire, who had stopped responding to texts. The resemblance was uncanny, too perfect, too real. Emily tried to leave, but the doors wouldn't open. The house groaned, settling around her. It wouldn't let her go. Not yet. In the attic, she found the final doll. It sat in the center of the room, cradled in in an antique rocking chair. Her own face stared back at her. Porcelain. Flawless. The doll's eyes shifted, following her movements. Emily gasped, stumbling back, her foot catching on something hard and brittle. A mirror. She turned. Her reflection was wrong. Her skin too smooth. Her eyes glass-like. She touched her cheek. It was cold. Porcelain. The real Emily was gone. Just another doll in the collection. Weeks later, a distant relative came to settle the estate. They found the house untouched, empty. Only the dolls remained. And one of them looked just like Emily. The end. The carnival had been gone for years. Autumn winds had stripped away the overgrowth, revealing rusted rides and faded banners beneath the swirling leaves. The town had long forgotten it, but now, with its skeletal remains exposed, it beckoned. So, of course, Lucy and her friends had to go. Just one night, Eric grinned, stepping through the broken entrance gate. We take some pics, tell some ghost stories, and boom, legends. Lucy shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. The air was too still, despite the restless leaves dancing around them. The wind whispered through the metal bones of the carnival, carrying something that sounded eerily like laughter. But there was no one here, just them, just ghosts. They wandered past the tilted Ferris wheel, its cabin swaying in the breeze. The old carousel stood motionless, horses frozen mid-gallop, their painted eyes cracked and peeling. Then Lucy saw it. A fortune-teller's tent, half collapsed but still standing. The entrance flapped, beckoning. Inside, a single machine waited, the Madame Vera fortune-teller. Its glass face was smudged with dust, but the mechanical figure inside was perfectly preserved. A woman in faded silks, her porcelain hand resting on a lever. Beneath it, a coin slot and a metal drawer labeled, "Turn the handle, know the truth." Lucy hesitated. Then she turned it. The machine whirred to life. A slip of yellowed paper curled out from the drawer. Lucy grabbed it. The words, printed in jagged red ink, read, "One will fall beneath the wheel." She swallowed. "Guys, look at this." Eric snatched the paper. Just some old prank thing. He crumpled it, stuffing it in his pocket. This place was full of cheap gimmicks, relax. Then a loud snap echoed through the grounds. They turned toward the Ferris wheel. One of its cabins broke loose. It crashed down right where Will had been standing. They dug through the rusted wreckage, calling his name. Nothing. No blood. No body. Only the wind, laughing. "We need to go," Lucy choked. But something pulled her back. The machine, it stood waiting, gears clicking, as if demanding another turn. She knew she shouldn't. She turned it anyway. Another slip of paper slid out. "One will drown in the mirror's eye." Lucy's breath hitched. "Where's Emily?" A scream. They ran toward the funhouse, its cracked mirrors winking in the moonlight. Emily's reflection flickered again and again, but she wasn't there. Only her face, distorted in the glass. Mouth open, eyes wide, silent, trapped, two gone. Only Lucy and Eric remained. He grabbed her arm. "It's the machine. We have to destroy it." Lucy's fingers trembled. "What if it won't let us?" Eric punched the glass. The porcelain fortune-teller cracked, a single eye shattering. The wind howled, curling around them in invisible hands. Lucy's hair whipped forward, obscuring her vision. The machine hummed, then spat out one last slip. Her fingers curled around it. Eric's breath hitched as he read over her shoulder. "The last will vanish with the wind." The words bled through the paper, shifting, alive. The wind surged, a force not just of nature but of hunger. Lucy turned to run, but Eric was already gone. Leaves swirled where he had stood. His name whispered in the wind. She gasped, stumbled, and the machine clicked, waiting a final turn. Morning. The town was quiet, the carnival gone, swallowed once more beneath the earth. Nothing left, except a single paper slip drifting along the roadside. On it in crimson ink, Lucy's name. The end. Jane shivered as she stepped onto the porch of the Airbnb. The listing had described it as having artistic flair, but standing before the isolated cabin in the woods, she only felt uneasy. Every room inside boasted massive antique mirrors, some gilded, others warped by age. "This place is unique," she murmured. Ryan chuckled, dropping their bags. "It's got a weird charm, don't you think?" Jane forced a smile, but her eyes flicked toward a floor-length mirror in the hallway. Something about its depth made her stomach twist. Then, as she turned away, she caught it, a flicker in the glass. Her reflection had lingered just a second too long. The first time Jane saw Ryan sleepwalking, she wasn't too alarmed. She woke to the soft creak of the wooden floor. Blinking, she saw Ryan standing in the living room, facing the largest mirror in the cabin. "Ryan," she whispered. He didn't respond. His reflection was moving differently than him, chest rising and falling in the wrong rhythm. Its mouth was open, moving in frantic, silent words Jane couldn't hear. Jane's pulse hammered. Ryan jerked awake, his eyes glassy. He blinked at her. "Babe, what's wrong?" "You were sleepwalking." He glanced at the mirror, invisibly tensed, rubbing his arms. "Weird dream. I don't know. Forget it." He stumbled back to bed, but Jane remained rooted to the spot, watching the mirror. The reflection still looked wrong, even in the darkness. By the next day, the mirrors were changing. At first it was subtle, a blink delayed, a hand not quite in sync. Jane stood before the bathroom mirror, applying lipstick. She turned to grab her makeup bag, glancing back absently. Her reflection hadn't moved. She gasped, stumbling back. The reflection caught up a moment later, mirroring her wide-eyed fear. She slammed the medicine cabinet shut. Just my imagination. But she felt watched. The house wasn't just reflecting, it was observing. Ryan grew distant, distracted. "You okay?" Jane asked at dinner. He didn't look up. His fork covered over his plate, his gaze locked on the mirror behind Jane. "Yeah," he muttered. Jane swallowed. His reflection behind her wasn't eating. It was staring directly at her, mouth moving soundlessly. That night Ryan sleepwalked again, but this time his reflection was smiling. Jane needed answers. She searched the cabin and found a leather-bound journal beneath the floorboards. The entries were frantic, descending into madness. "Mirrors do not reflect, they consume. Leave the house, but you will not leave. I am still here. I will always be here." A final note, etched into the last page. "If you see yourself smile, run." Jane's hands trembled as she put the journal down. Across the room, the largest mirror reflected her perfectly. But as she met her own gaze, her reflection's lips curled upward. Jane's stomach dropped. Her real face had not moved. Jane ran to Ryan, shaking him awake. "We have to go." Ryan blinked groggily. "What?" "Now." She grabbed his hand and rushed to the door, but the mirrors shifted around them. The cabin was no longer the same. The hallway was endless, mirrors stretching on either side, reflecting twisted versions of themselves. Ryan's reflection grinned. "Jane," he murmured, voice hollow. Jane turned to him. His real body stood frozen, but his reflection reached out, grasping at something unseen. Then Ryan convulsed, a choked gasp escaping his lips. Jane screamed. Ryan's real body collapsed, but in the mirror his reflection remained standing, watching her. "Ryan," Jane whispered. The reflection smirked. "You should have left sooner." Jane bolted. The mirrors distorted the exit, but she found the front door, throwing it open. Running into the dark woods. She gasped for air, her heart a drum in her ears. The night was cold, the wind sharp. She had escaped, hadn't she? A faint tapping made her pause. She turned slowly. The cabin window reflected her, but it wasn't right. Inside the house, her reflection watched her, lips curling into a knowing smile. Jane lifted a trembling hand. The reflection did not. Then, tap, tap, it raised its hand, pressed it against the glass, and waved. Jane felt nothing, just empty, like something had been left behind. The end. The station was nearly deserted when Victor stepped onto the last train of the night. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold, sterile glow over the empty car. He exhaled, rubbing his temples. Another long day, another late ride home. The train lurched forward. The doors sealed shut with a final hiss. Victor slumped into a seat, closing his eyes for just a second. A crackling announcement played over the speakers. "Next stop, Static." Victor frowned. That wasn't his station. At first, he thought nothing of it. Maybe he misheard the announcement. But as the train continued, station after station flickered past without stopping. Victor sat up. That was strange. He checked his phone. No service. The reception was always bad underground, but this felt different. Across the car, the only other passenger sat at the far end, motionless, hands folded neatly in their lap. Victor ignored the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine and stood, making his way to the conductor's booth. He knocked. No response. Knocked again. The door slid open. Inside, the conductor sat stiffly, staring ahead. His uniform looked outdated, an old-fashioned cap resting neatly atop his head. His face was pale, his eyes distant, unfocused. Victor cleared his throat. "Hey, I think you missed my stop." The conductor didn't blink. "The train stops when you do." Victor started. "What?" The man slowly turned his head, his eyes locking onto Victor's. His pupils were clouded, as if looking at something Victor couldn't see. He repeated, voice hollow, "It stops when you do." Victor stepped back into the car, heart pounding. This was ridiculous. Maybe the train was malfunctioning. Maybe the conductor was just messing with him. He turned to the only other passenger, a man in a dark coat sitting unnaturally still. Victor hesitated, then approached. "Excuse me." The man's lips moved, but no sound came out. Victor froze. The man's mouth worked soundlessly, like he was murmuring to himself, eyes unfocused, as if trapped in a conversation Victor couldn't hear. Victor took a step back, scanning the train. No one had boarded. No one had left. The same empty coffee cup sat on a nearby seat, untouched, unmoving. His own reflection in the window lagged half a second behind. His pulse quickened. He needed to get off this train. Victor began searching, checking under seats, inside compartments, any clue to what was happening. That's when he saw it. A scrap of paper tucked into the seat cushion. He pulled it out, unfolding the crumpled note. "Don't fall asleep." His throat went dry. Another note wedged between the seats. "If you talk to him, you're next." A chill crawled down his spine. Victor turned slowly back to the murmuring man. The stranger was now staring right at him. Victor's breathing quickened. He ran back to the conductor's booth and slammed on the door. "Stop the train." turned back to the car. The murmuring man was gone. The seat was empty. Victor spun around frantically. Where did he go? He had been there just seconds ago. Then he saw it, the man's reflection in the window, still seated, still staring. But now, his lips weren't murmuring. They were smiling. Victor stumbled backward. He needed to get to the front of the train. With no other options, he raced down the corridor, pushing past rows of empty seats. At the end of the car, there was another door, the entrance to the engine room. He hesitated. Something inside him screamed not to open it. But what choice did he have? Victor reached for the handle and pulled. Inside, there were no controls, no dials, no levers, just a mirror. Victor's own reflection stared back at him. For a moment, silence. Then, the reflection moved first. Victor hadn't moved, yet his reflection took a step forward, closing the space between them. Victor's mouth went dry. "What is this?" he whispered. His reflection tilted its head. Then, in a perfectly calm voice, it spoke. "You've been here before." Victor shook his head. "No, this is just a dream," or, his reflection smiled, "this is your stop." And before Victor could react, his reflection reached out and pulled him into the glass. The train slowed. For the first time all night, the doors opened. A silent, empty station stretched beyond the platform. The seats inside were completely empty. No Victor, no murmuring passengers, no crumpled notes, just the conductor, staring ahead. The doors hissed shut. The train lurched forward, rolling into the night once more. At the next station, a new passenger stepped aboard, exhausted, rubbing his temples. The conductor punched his ticket. Next stop. The end. Stillwater's Harvest Festival was meant to be a celebration. Bonfires, cider, and rows of gourd lanterns flickering in the fields. The village had done it every October for generations. The elders claimed the lanterns were more than decorations. "They keep the restless away," they would say, their wrinkled hands carefully carving grotesque faces into the thick orange shells. Clara didn't believe in that nonsense. Neither did her friends. That's why they were in the fields after midnight, laughing, daring each other to snuff out the flames. Okay, my turn." Clara grinned, stepping between the rows of flickering gourds. The scent of damp earth and burnt pumpkin filled the air. "Do it, Clara," Mason taunted. "Let's see if the restless come get us." She knelt beside a particularly large lantern, its face carved into a twisted, shrieking expression. With a quick breath, she pinched out the flame. The night seemed to inhale around them. For a moment, everything was too quiet. Then the wind picked up, and the field behind them rustled, but there was no wind. The next morning, the festival grounds were in chaos. Every crop in the field had withered overnight. The once tall stalks of corn stood limp and blackened. The pumpkin patches were bare, their vines curling like dead veins in the soil. Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This had never happened before. "Did we do this?" whispered Elise, hugging herself. Mason forced a laugh. "Oh, come on, it's just bad weather or something." But Clara wasn't so sure, especially when she noticed that Mason's shadow stretched the wrong way. By noon, Mason had changed. His voice was slightly off, his speech sluggish, like something was figuring out how to move his mouth. By evening, Elise had changed too. She sat motionless on her porch, murmuring in a voice that wasn't hers. And by nightfall, Clara could hear whispers in the fields, low, rasping voices beneath the soil, watching, waiting. She tried to tell her parents, but they wouldn't listen. This has happened before, her grandmother finally said. A long time ago, before we learned to keep them away. Clara swallowed. Who? Her grandmother only stared. Later that night, Clara saw something moving beneath the ground. She knelt in the field, her breath fogging in the autumn air. The earth shifted, ever so slightly. She reached out, brushing away the loose dirt, and found a face staring back at her. Clara ran. She found Mason in the town square, standing beneath the festival lanterns. His eyes were hollow, his lips moving soundlessly. Mason, she gasped, shaking him. We have to fix this. He smiled. It wasn't Mason's smile. Then he exhaled, and a thick dark mist spilled from his mouth like smoke from a dying fire. Clara stumbled backward. Her friend was already gone. She ran back to the fields, desperate, searching. One last lantern flickered weakly in the distance, its carved face freshly made. Her breath caught in her throat. It was her face. A single gust of wind blew the candle out. Clara screamed, her fingers turned translucent. Her body faded, like the ink of an old, forgotten story. The earth opened, and the faces beneath the soil welcomed her home. A year has passed. The harvest festival returned. New lanterns flickered in the fields. A new girl walked the rows, daring her friends to snuff out the light. She knelt beside a particularly large lantern, its face carved into a twisted, silent scream. She didn't recognize the face, but Clara did, from inside. The end. Beth hated the first days. The awkward small talk, the forced smiles, the way every new office felt like a slightly different brand of cage. But she needed this job. Texan was a sleek, glass-towered monolith in the city, a company that promised innovation but felt like every other corporate machine. Beth had barely settled into her cubicle when she overheard two co-workers whispering behind her. Have you ever heard of it? One asked. Yeah, you know where it comes from. Shh, someone might hear. Beth kept typing, pretending not to listen. But the next time she passed by the break room, she caught another snippet of conversation. The gray room. It's real, I swear. My cousin worked here before me, said they used to send people in there before HR shut it down. Then why is it still there? No idea, but don't go looking for it. That was how it started. A name, a whisper, a warning. The hum. The 7th floor didn't exist. At least, not in the company directory. The elevator button skipped straight from 6 to 8. But Beth wasn't stupid. Every building had a 7th floor. And yet, at night, when the office was quiet and most employees had gone home, she swore she could hear it. A low, barely perceptible hum. She asked about it once. Drop it, said Alex from IT, eyes darting around like someone might overhear. There's nothing up there, just old storage. No reason to ask. But Beth had always been the kind of person who needed to see things for herself. So on her 3rd week at Texan, she stayed late. She waited until the office was empty. Then she went to the elevators and pried open the panel. There it was. The button for the 7th floor. Someone had covered it with a thin, almost seamless piece of metal. She pressed it. The elevator jerked, groaned, then ascended. The doors slid open to reveal a hallway bathed in dull flickering light. The hum was louder now. The gray room. The hallway was empty. No cubicles, no desks, just a single door at the end marked with a faded number, 7F. Beth's breath came shallow as she reached for the handle. Unlocked. Inside, the room was nothing. Gray walls, a gray floor, rows of filing cabinets that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. A row of outdated monitors lined one wall, their screens dark, and in the center, a single chair. It faced a blank screen, waiting. Beth hesitated. She told herself she'd take a quick look and leave, but her legs moved before she made the decision. She sat. The hum stopped. The screen flickered to life. Playback. At first the footage was grainy, unrecognizable. Then suddenly, Beth saw herself. Not today's version of her, but moments from her past. There she was in high school, laughing with friends the same night she spread that rumor about Casey. Then college, standing in front of her dorm, telling her roommate she didn't have time for her breakdown. Then her mother, eyes hollow, asking if Beth would come home for Christmas. Beth shaking her head, making excuses. She felt sick. She reached for the armrests, ready to push herself up. The chair wouldn't budge. The footage continued. A coworker last year asking for help with a project. Beth ignoring her. Her ex texting late at night saying he needed to talk. Beth leaving him on red. Her sister, voice cracking over the phone. I just feel so alone. Beth had told her to sleep it off. The video played every moment she had ignored, dismissed, or hurt someone. Moments she had buried. Turn it off. Her voice was barely a whisper. The screen glitched. The footage rewound. Fast forward, Beth's stomach clenched. The next clip wasn't from her past. It was the office. The same room she sat in now. The same chair. The same screen. And in it, her own body, slumped forward, unmoving, dead. Beth screamed. She wrenched at the chair, kicking, twisting, nothing. The screen kept playing. The door to the gray room opened and a new face peered in, a new hire. Beth watched, horror creeping up her spine, as the woman in the footage whispered to a coworker in the break room. You ever hear it? The hum returned, louder now. The screen blinked off. Beth opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came. The room stayed gray. The chair stayed still. The door never opened again. And downstairs the office continued as usual. New employees whispered, and the hum continued. The end. The sign at the entrance was half rotted, the words barely legible beneath a tangle of vines. Black Hollow Forest, enter at your own risk. We'll be fine, Ryan said, adjusting the straps on his pack. It's just a stupid legend. Maya glanced at the tree line, the dense mist curling around the trunks like fingers. Yeah, but legends start somewhere. Jake chuckled, tightening his boots. You sound like one of those horror podcasts. There were 4 of them. Ryan, Maya, Jake, and Hannah. A weekend hike. A challenge to see if they could handle Black Hollow's infamous trails. People called it the Forgetting Woods, a place where hikers sometimes wandered out hours later with blank expressions, unable to remember why they had gone in. Maya didn't believe in curses, but the air was wrong. Thick, stagnant. They stepped into the woods. The mist swallowed them whole. They walked for an hour, then 2. The path was barely visible beneath the damp leaves, winding in unpredictable loops. Ryan paused. Hey, didn't we pass that tree already? The others looked up, a massive oak, its bark scarred with deep gashes. Jagged lines, almost like initials. MHHLJS. Jake ran a hand over the carvings. Looks like a lot of people came through here. Maya's stomach twisted. The initials felt familiar. They hiked another hour before stopping for water. Ryan dropped his bag with a sigh. We should head back before dark. We'll be fine, Ryan said, adjusting the straps on his pack. It's just a stupid legend. Maya froze. What? Ryan frowned. What? You just said that? Jake looked between them. No, he didn't. Yes, he did, Maya insisted, voice unsteady. Ryan looked genuinely confused. Then, as if the thought slipped through his fingers, his face smoothed over. Let's keep moving. As the sun dipped, they decided to set up camp. But when Maya reached into her bag for a flashlight, it was gone. She unzipped every pocket, checked the ground. Nothing. Hannah groaned. Guys, I had like 6 granola bars. They're all gone. Ryan's face paled. My compass is missing. Jake turned his backpack upside down, empty. The air pressed in. The mist thickened. Something shifted in the silence, a whisper too faint to make out. The woods were watching. They found it near the base of a dying tree, its spine cracked and pages warped from moisture. A notebook, half buried in the leaves. Maya picked it up. The first page was scrawled in frantic, slashing handwriting. Do not forget who you are. Do not stop moving. Do not listen to the trees. She flipped the page. I came in with 3 friends. I can't remember their names. The words blurred. Some letters scratched over as if rewritten again and again. HL, MHJS. Familiar. Too familiar. Ryan reached for the book. Guys, this is my handwriting. Silence. Hannah took a slow step back. Ryan, when did you write this? His hands trembled. I don't remember. One by one they disappeared. Jake was first. He had been walking just ahead of them when suddenly, nothing. Maya called his name until her throat burned, but his footprints in the damp earth led nowhere, fading into mist. Hannah followed soon after. She turned to say something, her brow creased in confusion, then her face went blank. She stared at Maya. Do I know you? Then she was gone, swallowed by the trees. Ryan and Maya ran. The woods twisted around them. The mist thickened, clogging their lungs. Maya turned to Ryan, heart hammering. Say my name. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His eyes darted back and forth, desperate. His voice cracked. I don't know. She grabbed his shoulders. Ryan, you know me. You know my name. But his gaze was empty. Then he was gone too. Maya ran until her legs gave out. She collapsed at the base of a gnarled tree, gasping. The notebook clutched in her hand. She flipped to the last page. The ink was fresh. Her own writing. If you're reading this, you're the last one. The forest takes names first, then memories, then people. It doesn't want you to leave. Her breath shuddered. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the notebook was gone. She blinked at the empty ground, at her empty hands. Her mind was blank. She tried to think of why she was here. She couldn't. The mist rolled on. Deep within the woods, a new sapling pushed through the damp earth. Its bark is smooth, untouched. Then slowly, letters carved themselves into the wood. MJLJS, and beneath them one last set of initials, MT. The tree stood among hundreds of others, stretching into the endless mist. A forest full of names no one would ever remember. The end. Daniel Parker didn't believe in suburban superstitions. When he moved into the affluent neighborhood of Willow Crest, he ignored the unnerving uniformity of the place. Perfectly trimmed hedges, gleaming white picket fences, and most unsettling of all, the statues. Every house had one. Life-size stone replicas of the homeowners stood proudly on their lawns, crafted with eerie precision. The faces bore uncanny detail, the expressions frozen somewhere between serenity and sorrow. The sculptor does fine work, said Mrs. Holloway, his next-door neighbor, as she tended to the roses beside her own statue, a striking likeness of herself in a sun hat. You'll get yours soon enough. Daniel shook his head. Not really my thing. Mrs. Holloway's smile faded. It's not a choice, dear. It's tradition. Daniel laughed it off. Tradition, right? That night, he locked his doors. It was there the next morning. A perfect stone replica of himself stood on his front lawn, gazing toward his house. Daniel's stomach lurched. He hadn't ordered this. No one had come to measure him, take photos, nothing. Stepping closer, he examined the craftsmanship. Every detail was there, the slight crease in his forehead, the mole near his left ear, even the watch on his wrist, carved from stone. His watch. Daniel checked his own wrist. His watch was missing. The neighborhood was quiet. Too quiet. Mrs. Holloway stood at her window watching. Over the next few days, Daniel tried to ignore the statue, but it changed. At first, barely noticeable. Its posture seems heavier, the shoulders more hunched. Then its expression grew tired, lips downturned. By the end of the week, the statue looked sick. Dark cracks spread along its arms like veins, its features sunken as though something had been draining it. And Daniel felt it too. His body grew sluggish, his skin paled. He woke up exhausted no matter how much he slept. One night he caught his reflection in the mirror and gasped. He looked older, not by much, just enough to notice the extra lines near his eyes, the slight gauntness in his cheeks. Outside, the statue stared back. Daniel grabbed a sledgehammer from his garage and marched onto the lawn. His neighbors watched silently from their porches. No one stopped him. The first swing struck its shoulder, sending a crack down its torso. The second swing shattered part of its face. He didn't stop until the statue lay in pieces scattered across the grass. Daniel wiped his brow, panting. That's the end of it. Mrs. Holloway just sighed. You shouldn't have done that, dear. Daniel ignored her, but the next morning he woke to find it all over again, standing in the exact same spot. Only now it looked worse, more withered, more decayed, and Daniel felt weaker than ever. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. His skin took on a grayish pallor. The statue mirrored him, its features wasting away. He tried leaving, packed his bags and got in his car, but no matter how far he drove, the streets looped back to his house. His phone refused to call anyone outside Willow Crest. He was trapped. That night, he sat on his porch, watching the statue as it watched him. Mrs. Holloway approached, voice gentle. The sculptor only finishes when you're ready. Daniel's mouth was dry. Who is he? A pause. There's no he, just work. The work. Daniel's breath shook, and when it's finished, Mrs. Holloway gave him a sad smile. Then you move on. Daniel woke to silence. The air felt heavier, as though the world itself was holding its breath. He stepped outside and froze. The statue had crumbled. Nothing remained but a pile of dust, the wind already carrying it away. His heart pounded. Maybe it was over, maybe. Then he felt it. His limbs stiffened. His breath slowed. His skin hardened. Daniel staggered, tried to move, but his joints locked in place. His fingers turned gray. Then his arms, his legs. As he exhaled his final breath, his body stiffened completely. A new statue now stood on the lawn, perfectly carved, eerily lifelike, and in the days to come, the neighbors nodded in approval. The sculptor had finished their work, and the neighborhood remained as it always had, perfect. The end. And that's the end. But the night is far from over. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Tell me, are you still awake? Or did the whispers follow you into your dreams? If sleep won't come just yet, there are plenty more stories waiting for you. Go on, pick another. I'll be here.